He was just delivering a package until the cop made him kneel on the sidewalk. It was 2:17 p.m. on a Wednesday when Jamal Carter pulled up in front of the Wilshire Apartments. The street buzzed with the usual rhythm of city life. Honking cars, kids on scooters, mothers with strollers. Jamal, a 24-year-old black delivery driver working for a regional courier service, had 3 stops left and only 15 minutes to finish them. The afternoon heat had soaked through his brown uniform, and the back of his van smelled like cardboard, plastic wrap, and sweat. He double-parked for less than 2 minutes. The package was for a single mother who lived on the 3rd floor. She'd left a note on the app. Please knock loud. My baby naps between 1 and 3. Jamal had knocked twice, gently placed the box on the welcome mat, snapped a proof of delivery photo, and turned to jog back down the stairs. But something had changed. A patrol car had pulled up next to his van. The driver's side door was already open, and a white police officer with square shoulders, aviator sunglasses, and a shaved head was approaching. Jamal slowed his pace instinctively. The officer's hand hovered near his holster. "Is this your vehicle?" he demanded before Jamal even reached the last step. "Yes, sir. I'm just finishing a drop." "License and registration." "It's a company van. My badge is right." "Step away from the vehicle. Now hands where I can see them." People on the sidewalk started slowing their steps. The barista from the corner cafe peeked out through the window. A woman pushing a stroller stopped walking and turned around. Jamal froze. He could feel the warmth of the pavement radiating through the soles of his shoes. His hands rose slowly, open, fingers spread wide like pages of a book. "Sir, I have my ID badge right here, just delivering packages." "On your knees," Jamal's eyes widened. "Excuse me." "I said, on your knees. You heard me." The silence became sharp, like a glass about to crack. Jamal looked around, his breath short, heart hammering in his throat. He wasn't a threat. He had no weapons, only a scanner clipped to his belt and a handheld terminal. But the officer didn't flinch. "You people think you can park wherever you want. What else you hiding in the back of that van?" Jamal knelt. First one knee, then the other. The concrete burned through the fabric of his pants. His head bowed, not in submission, but in resignation. Someone across the street began recording. Another whispered, "What the hell is going on?" The officer circled him like a predator, sizing up an already wounded animal. "What's in the box?" "It was a box of diapers, sir." "Smart mouth, huh?" A group of teenagers nearby watched in silence. One girl, barely 16, clenched her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. A man in a suit glanced briefly, then walked faster in the opposite direction. 2 tourists whispered in French, one filming discreetly behind a pair of sunglasses. Jamal didn't speak again. What could he say that wouldn't be used against him? He stared down at the small oil stain on the sidewalk near his foot. The air smelled like gasoline and irony, and then, from the edge of the crowd, a presence. No flashing lights, no raised voice. Just a shift in the atmosphere. A calm, steady voice rang out, not loud, not aggressive, but clear enough to cut through the noise like a bell in a cathedral. "You done humiliating him, officer." Heads turned. The officer stiffened. Standing just behind the line of bystanders, in jeans and a plain black t-shirt, was Denzel Washington. No entourage, no camera crew, just the man himself. He stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on the officer, his tone even. "He's on his knees. You made your point. What's the next step? You gonna cuff him for working?" The officer didn't reply. For the first time, he looked unsure. Jamal lifted his head slightly. Denzel looked at him, not with pity, not with sympathy, but with something rarer, recognition. "You can stand now, son." And Jamal did. His legs trembled, his eyes burned, but he stood. Because someone saw him. Really saw him. The sidewalk was still. The officer's command had silenced the city. The usual rhythm of traffic and footsteps had fallen into a strange hush, as if the moment itself was holding its breath. Jamal Carter remained on his knees, his hands no longer raised, but resting stiffly on his thighs. The pavement burned through his pants. Sweat had soaked the back of his shirt. His throat was dry, but he dared not swallow. His eyes didn't meet the officers. They stared down at the box of diapers knocked onto its side, at the laces of his worn sneakers, at the shadow that now loomed just behind the officer. Denzel Washington had stepped out of the crowd, but he hadn't made a sound. Until he did. "You done humiliating him, officer?" The voice was calm, not loud, not angry, but it landed with the weight of a gavel. The officer turned abruptly, hand twitching instinctively near his holster. "Sir, step back. This is police business." "So is justice," Denzel replied. The crowd rustled behind him. Phones stayed raised, but now they trembled in hands. No one knew what would happen next. No one wanted to breathe too loudly. The officer's mouth twitched. He took a step toward Denzel, who didn't move. "I said step back." Denzel raised one hand, not in surrender, but to hold space. "He's a delivery driver. The badge on his chest says so. You know what he was doing 5 minutes ago? Trying to get a package to a single mom before her baby's nap ended?" The officer scoffed. "He was parked illegally." "Then give him a ticket." He was acting suspicious. He was holding a box of diapers. A ripple of restrained chuckles passed through the crowd, but it wasn't mockery. It was disbelief. The kind of disbelief that grows when truth stares a lie in the face and doesn't blink. "You don't know what it's like out here," the officer muttered. "That's where you're wrong," Denzel said, taking a slow step forward. "Because I grew up where people like him get treated like this every day, and they're told it's normal." He turned slightly, motioning toward Jamal, who was still kneeling, still silent, still staring at the sidewalk like it might open and swallow him. "He didn't say a word to you. He didn't fight. And yet here he is, on his knees, in front of a crowd, in front of a gun, in front of a city that says it cares, but looks away when it matters." A flicker of guilt passed through the officer's face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I don't take lectures from celebrities." "Good," Denzel replied. "Then take it from a man. A man who's seen this happen too many times and decided, today, it's not happening again." He took another step. The distance between them shrank to less than a yard. The tension was visible, like two storms brushing shoulders without exploding. "Now, take your hand off your weapon." The officer didn't move. "That's an order?" "Number. That's a request. The kind you make when you still believe in the people you swore to serve." There was a beat, then another, and finally the officer lowered his hand. Slowly. The pressure broke. Jamal looked up, unsure if what he was seeing was real. "You okay, son?" Denzel asked gently, turning to him. Jamal nodded stiffly. His lips parted, but no sound came. "Not yet." "Stand up." He did. Wobbly at first, but upright. For the first time in the entire scene, the delivery driver stood taller than the man in uniform. Denzel turned to the crowd. "Y'all still filming?" A few people lowered their phones. "Good, because the next part doesn't need to go viral. It just needs to be remembered." He looked back at the officer. "You want to write him a ticket? Write one? But make it honest. And when you go home tonight, ask yourself if you'd have pulled that gun if his skin had been a little lighter." The officer didn't answer. He turned and walked back to his patrol car. Jamal's breath finally came in a shudder. "Thank you," he said, almost a whisper. Denzel shook his head. "Don't thank me. Just stay standing." The crowd, still watching, began to clap. Not wildly, not like fans, but like citizens. Some people stepped forward. One woman offered Jamal a bottle of water. Another placed a hand on his shoulder. And for the first time that day, Jamal Carter was not alone. For a few seconds after Jamal stood up, the city remained unnaturally quiet. No car horns, no footsteps, no claps. Just the subtle creak of leather from the officer's belt as he stepped back toward his patrol car, his body stiff, his face unreadable behind those mirrored lenses. He didn't say a word. He didn't apologize. But he retreated, and that was enough. Jamal didn't move right away. His legs were still shaky, his eyes unfocused, as if unsure whether the danger had truly passed or if this was just a pause before the next humiliation. His shirt clung to his back, dark with sweat. His hands, still half lifted, slowly dropped to his sides. He looked at Denzel, not as a movie star, not even as a savior, but as someone who had simply refused to look away. "You all right?" Denzel asked. Jamal nodded, barely. "You don't gotta say anything. Just breathe." And Jamal did. A shallow inhale, then another, like a man relearning how to own his body after it had been claimed by public shame. The crowd, once frozen, now began to shift. A young woman, maybe 19, wearing a blue hoodie and carrying a college backpack, stepped forward first. "I saw the whole thing," she said, voice trembling. "He wasn't doing anything wrong." Denzel turned slightly toward her, giving a small nod. "You sure?" "Yeah. I was standing across the street. He was only parked for 2 minutes." Then a man in a business suit added, "I was watching from the cafe." Cop came out like he was expecting trouble. The kid just froze. Jamal blinked. He hadn't even realized how many people had been there, watching, recording, and now speaking. One woman placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. Another handed him a bottle of water. A teenager took off their "No Justice, No Peace" pin and clipped it to his delivery strap. Denzel stayed where he was, present, steady, but no longer in control of the scene. The crowd had taken it from him, and that was exactly how it should be. Then, a sudden motion, a loud voice. "You all acting like he's some kind of hero." Everyone turned. It was a man near the edge of the sidewalk. White, mid-50s, wearing an American flag t-shirt and mirrored sunglasses pushed onto his forehead. He had his phone out, pointing it at Jamal and Denzel. "He broke the law. You don't get to act like the victim when you ignore parking zones." The crowd tensed. Several people turned toward Denzel, expecting a response. But Jamal was the one who stepped forward. Only one step, but it was enough. "I'm not a hero," he said, voice quiet but firm. "And I'm not perfect. But I'm not gonna kneel every time someone thinks I don't belong." The man in the flag shirt opened his mouth to reply, but the crowd had already moved past him. His words bounced off silence, off truth. That moment, just one sentence, was enough to shift everything. Suddenly, Jamal wasn't the story of what had been done to him. He was the story of what he stood up from. Phones came down, eyes lifted. People saw him not as a headline, not as a hashtag, but as a man. Denzel turned and looked him in the eye. "You didn't need me. You just needed someone to stop talking long enough so you could speak." Jamal nodded. His throat tightened, but he smiled anyway. A tired smile. A true one. For the first time that day, he stood on his own, and the crowd stood with him. The sun had dipped just low enough to cast long shadows across the sidewalk. The city lights hadn't come on yet, but daylight was fading. And in that fading light, something had changed. Jamal Carter stood at the center of it all, not because he had asked for attention, but because silence had finally stepped aside. He wasn't a headline anymore. He wasn't a moment. He was a man who had been made to kneel in public, and had risen again, with witnesses. The heckler in the flag shirt had disappeared into the background. His voice had been swallowed by something larger, by presence, by truth, by unity. The police cruiser was gone too. No flashing lights, no sirens, just the memory of what had almost happened. Denzel stood off to the side, arms crossed, back against a lamppost. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He simply watched, letting Jamal own the space that had once crushed him. A boy, maybe 10 years old, stepped out of the crowd, gripping a small plastic flag in one hand. He walked hesitantly toward Jamal, his eyes wide and curious. "Mister, were you really in trouble?" Jamal looked down at him. He crouched, level with the boy's eyes. "Yeah, but not anymore." The boy's grip on the flag tightened. Then, slowly, he straightened his spine and lifted the flag in a small, respectful salute. The crowd fell quiet again, but not out of fear this time. Out of reverence. A woman near the front began to clap. Slowly. Not for drama. For respect. Then another. And another. Within moments, the sidewalk echoed with a steady human rhythm. Hands clapping not for a celebrity, not for a performance, but for the dignity of a man who never asked to be seen, but deserved it all along. Jamal turned slightly, eyes finding Denzel's across the small distance. "I didn't think anyone would say anything," he said, not loud, but clear. "Sometimes they won't," Denzel replied. "But today, they did. Because you stood." The two men exchanged a simple nod. No bows, no speeches. Just two men, one who had spoken and one who had listened. A breeze stirred the dust and the wrappers on the sidewalk. The package Jamal had dropped earlier still lay at the curb, slightly dented, but unopened. He walked over, picked it up, and looked at the address label. Then, without a word, he crossed the street and entered the building it was meant for. Because his job wasn't over. And neither was the story. Denzel watched him go, then turned back toward the crowd. "You all saw it. Now ask yourselves this. What if you hadn't?" He didn't wait for an answer. He didn't need one. As the last of the daylight faded, people began to move, not with panic, but with purpose. Conversations started. Eyes met. A woman asked the name of the delivery company. Someone wrote it down. A teenager muttered, "That guy's a legend now." And others quietly agreed. The city hadn't changed completely, but it had shifted. Just slightly. Enough to be felt. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the buildings and the headlines and the heat, the echo of one man's simple words remained. "I'm not a hero, but I'm not kneeling anymore." And that was enough.